On today's show, let's talk about the Dallas Mavericks and how they match up with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm joined by Ben Beecken of Locked On Wolves to talk about what's changed for the Mavericks and what's the key for them guarding the Timberwolves in this series on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Mavericks, NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good, and the Mavericks have won the game.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show and making Locked On Mavs your first listen today, where the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day on any podcast platform. Leave us a 5-star review, like the video on YouTube, and comment anything below on the YouTube video. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code LOCKEDONNBA to get tickets, $20 off your first purchase of tickets all over the place. Terms apply. Ben Beecken joining me of Locked On Wolves. Again, this is part 2 of our crossover episode. We talked all about the Timberwolves in the first part. Let's talk about the Mavericks in this one. How do they match up? What's the key for Luka? What's the key for the Mavericks' success? How they change and become a defensive team? We'll talk about all that and more. Let's get into it. Ben Beecken from Locked On Wolves.
All right, part 2 of the Locked On Wolves, Locked On Mavs crossover episode, talking Wolves Mavs, of course, conference finals. And part 1 was yesterday. If you missed it, check it out on either Locked On Wolves or Locked On Mavs. Talked all things Wolves. Nick asking me questions about what to expect from the Wolves side of things. Now we're talking Mavs. And for Wolves fans, we have not seen the Dallas Mavericks since before the trade deadline. And obviously things look very different. The last game the Wolves and Mavs played, Dallas started a bunch of guys that aren't on the team anymore, and certainly guys that aren't in the rotation anymore. Only once this year did both Luka and Kyrie play against the Wolves in the same game. So I guess the softball open-ended question to start with is, what's the biggest Timberwolves fans that have not seen the Mavs play since whatever, late January, early February, whenever that was? What's the biggest thing Wolves fans should know about the post-deadline Dallas Mavericks?
This team plays defense now. This team did not play defense the way that they're doing right now. This team turned into, through the last 3 months of the season, one of the best defenses. I've been saying the number one defense. I'm pretty sure the Timberwolves are still the number one defense, and I can't be that blasphemous if I'm on the Timberwolves feed. But they play.
You're gonna get all kinds of comments. They
play defense now, and that's a new thing for the Mavericks. But they have these two centers in Gafford and Lively, who play, most of the they play opposite of each other and play opposite minutes. And when Maxi Kleber isn't available, they play all the minutes at center. And that has changed a whole lot. The Mavs are able to funnel guys right to them. They're able to switch pretty much everything with Luka and Kyrie playing really, really well and really locking in on defense too. Both those guys have been solid defenders. Luka's been a good defender at times against Kawhi and others throughout this series. And I think that having PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr., just having two wings, it really feels like the Dorian Finney-Smith, Reggie Bullock duo that they had 2 years ago when they went to the Western Conference Finals with a good defense. As long as they have two wings like that can fly around, they can defend a bunch of different positions, that can switch on to everybody, and that can also, the Mavs are rebounding now, which is also a new thing for the Mavericks. They have not rebounded the ball well at all. Again, last time they went to the Western Conference Finals, their starting center was Dwight Powell, who is still on the roster but doesn't play anymore. And so that is a huge, huge difference for this Mavericks team. The defensive end, the intention on the defensive end, they have become this team now that is defense first, which is a brand new thing for them too. And they don't get in these like 3-point shootouts anymore. When the Mavs played the Timberwolves before, it was, well, as long as they can hit more threes than the other team, then they're going to win. And now they can win games when they shoot 25% from three, 33% from three, and it doesn't hurt them as much.
Yeah, and just kind of going through I try it with all these matchups, go through all the numbers on like Cleaning the Glass and Basketball Reference, and how do these teams match up? Just strictly looking at, usually it's the body of work from the season. So like looking at Dallas, I mean, I believe their 3-point rate was like first or second in the league, if I remember correctly. And percentage wise, a little bit lower, but like they shoot more quarter threes than any other team. And obviously that was a big deal in the series against the Thunder, was guys like PJ Washington, shooting, what did he shoot? Like almost 41% from three for the series. Derrick Jones Jr. shooting almost 38% for the series. These are both guys that are sub 35%, I think sub 32% in terms of Derrick Jones Jr. for their career from outside the arc. Is that more a function of like how OKC was defending Dallas and like, hey, we're leaving these shots open and then these guys got hot because they were wide open? Or would you think that was more a function of like I don't know. I don't know that I'm asking you to like project that PJ Washington's now a 41% 3-point shooter, but like
he turned into Klay Thompson, Ben Beecken.
is that sustainable from a Dallas perspective, or how much of the Dallas success over OKC was like these guys got hot from three?
Yeah, if you run a Twitter account that has Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's profile, like picture in your profile, then this is a thing that you brought up over and over again. You guys just relied on 30% 3-point shooters to beat the Thunder, and it was fluky and all that. The thing is, all those shots were open. Almost every shot PJ Washington took from three was wide open. Every shot that Derrick Jones Jr. took from three was wide open. I mean, they're giving them up. The Thunder allowed the most amount of corner threes in the NBA. It was like 13% of the shots taken against them in the regular season were corner threes. You knew those shots were going to be available, and the Mavericks really took advantage of it. They set 2 to the ball anytime there was some kind of action, with Luka or Kyrie. And so those guys were helping off of those corner 3-point shooters, and they were wide open. And so they took those shots, and they knocked them down, which ended up helping the Mavs to win the series. They beat the Thunder from the 3-point line, which is a huge way that they swung a bunch of those games. And so, yeah, like those shots were open. I mean, yes, they shot really well from it, but you're not talking about 30% Derrick Jones Jr. You're talking about, does he shoot 40% on wide open catch and shoot threes? That's what you're talking about at that point. So you can't really look at just his 3-point percentage and say, well, that's the type of 3-point shooter he is, if all of his shots are going to be wide open like they were.
Right. And that's one of the areas where I think the Wolves can kind of claw back some of that is OKC is a good defensive team, obviously, but the Wolves were the best. Yeah, right. And the Wolves were the best all year, as we talked about. And in terms of defending the 3-point line, I know early in the season there was a lot of talk about the Wolves, how much luck is involved in that. And certainly there is some, but they still finished the year, opponents, Minnesota was 5th in defensive 3-point percentage, 4th in above the break 3-point percentage for opponents. They do a good job of, and that's accuracy, frequency wise. They do a pretty good job of denying those as well because they close out so well. Big part of that is length. The big part of that is athleticism, their ability to scramble and recover. And because their individual defenders are so good, they don't put 2 on the ball very often. That may change against Luka. It may have to change. I think likely Jaden McDaniels gets that matchup. And then, we kind of see what happens there, right? Like, I think that's where it starts, and it starts on Kyrie. What in your opinion what did OKC do that led to all of these open threes? And, is that something that Dallas is looking at and saying like, hey, because Minnesota's got these perimeter defenders, this is going to look different? Or is this just more Luka is Luka and it doesn't really matter what the defense does?
Yeah, at a certain point, it doesn't matter because Luka is Luka, and eventually everything breaks down. Like the way that you talk about playoff series, especially on offense, is it all gets broken down to the studs, and eventually it's just one player versus one defender, read and react, maybe throw a screen on there. Who's going to switch and who's not going to switch. So you're calling up, the same guy every time to come up and set the screen. But yeah, they were sending 2 to the ball, and they were trying to stop Kyrie, and they were trying to stop Luka, and they tried their best. But at a certain point, they just made the right reads. And Kyrie had a couple of games where he didn't score the ball that well, but he had double-digit assists, and he was making the right reads and all that. And so I think that the Thunder selling out, the Mavs sold out on the Thunder threes. They made Lou Dort beat them. They made Josh Giddey beat them by selling out on some of those threes. And the Thunder sold out on the 2 stars, and they really just set multiple to the ball anytime those guys had the ball, and that allowed the role guys to beat them in a lot of different ways. It wasn't just threes either. Derrick Jones Jr. got a bunch of attempts off the short roll. So did Derek Lively, where, they were sending 2 to the ball. And so all of a sudden he's just wide open on the free throw line, has to make a decision and then kick out. And he got another guy would get a 3 or, a layup or something like that from that. And so the action it all just gets broken down at a certain point, and you're just like, all right, it's Luka versus a defender. And that has proven to be good for the Mavs so far.
Who do you think I already said, I think it's Jaden that guards Luka. And I think, Ant said in his post-game interview after Game 7, I've got Kyrie. He said that immediately. I think it was to TNT. That's likely how the Wolves are going to roll this thing out. But they've still got Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They've still got, I guess he's your primary other perimeter defender that you're going to rely on. But who do you think on the Wolves roster is likely to have the most success guarding Luka? Do you think that they end up they don't have a Lou Dort that's got the strength, the physicality necessarily, and Jaden will get overpowered and pick up ticky-tack fouls occasionally? Is there anybody on the Wolves that you're worried about guarding Luka, or is this just they're going to have to commit 2 to Luka and then it's going to be those open threes like what OKC gave up?
This is going to sound dismissive. The only thing I'm worried about guarding Luka is his own knee. which is a real thing. Like this is something that's been an issue. He's been on the injury report every single game. He's been questionable going into games. It's a right knee sprain that he's had this whole time. It limited him. He was not able to play Zubac off the floor as well as he had in past seasons. Now Zubac has gotten better, and maybe the Clippers are set up better to have him play more, but he didn't dominate him in that matchup in the same way that he always has. It's a running joke on Mavs fans that Zubac just at night has nightmares of Luka guarding him one-on-one, and it just wasn't the same. And so I'm concerned about a Gobert switch on him in a way that I wasn't before with Luka, because he just doesn't have the same burst. He doesn't have the same lift. He can still shoot 60%, which he did in game 6 and ended up winning. Like he can summon and muster some really good scoring games for himself, but he just isn't the Luka where he has the most 40-point games in the playoffs under the age of 22 of anybody. Like he would have these crazy playoff games. He's always been a great playoff riser, and there's just been games where you go, man, did he just score 18 points? Like, did he just look normal against the rest of this team? And so I think that is something that I'm concerned about with Luka. You mentioned the physicality of Lou Dort. That messed with Luka a lot, because then Luka wasn't getting fouls against Lou Dort, and then he would get frustrated with the refs. That was another big thing that has just been a thing his whole career. But without the physicality, I don't know that I'm worried about an individual defender with Luka. You've got to put your team against him. And I thought that the matchup with the Timberwolves was good even before the trades. I thought that Luka matched up well with him. The thing I am worried about, though, is if his knee has him compromised like he has been, it's just not the same. And so I don't know if I feel as good about the matchup if he's not going to be 100%.
Yeah, I think that that's interesting that you felt that way, because before the trade deadline, I felt better about the Wolves matchup against the Mavs, because I felt like, I guess the one game Luka, the one game that Luka played against the Wolves this year, or I guess he played 2, but the first game he had 39 points on 27 shots against the Wolves, and Ant had a terrible game that game. The Wolves still ended up winning, right? So I still have to go back and watch that one and see exactly what happened, but that's interesting. All right, I want to get to the flip side of the matchup here next. I want to get to how the Mavs will take care of Ant. We'll do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And it's not just NBA tickets, it's any sort of tickets. You can get up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. I attend all of those, and Game Time is the best way to get tickets, especially if you're a procrastinator like me. Whatever your favorite artist is in town, if it's going to a comedy show, whatever the case may be, Game Time is the best place to go. They also have zone deals. You can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. You can also get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and their lowest price guarantee says that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a price somewhere else. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so let's talk about the other side of the ball. And Anthony Edwards has been guarded a couple of different ways so far this playoffs. Like Phoenix loaded up on Ant, like the whole series. They gave it away in game 82 when Phoenix dominated the Wolves. Ant struggled with it, but he had 5 days to study up. The coaching staff had 5 days to say, hey, Ant, here's how you need to beat, 2 on the ball or 2.5 plus on the ball as Phoenix guarded you. Denver tried straight up with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They tried straight up with Aaron Gordon. It didn't work. Christian Brown probably did the best, but it still didn't go well. And then Denver said, let's start just trapping him and trying to force the ball out of his hands. And Ant had a couple of poor games mixed in there. He wasn't efficient in game 7, but he made, for the most part, the right reads, especially as the game wore on. And Ant ended up having a great series. Dallas has some athletes. As you've said, it has been one of, if not the best defense over the last several weeks in the NBA. There are some athletic, good on-the-ball defenders that Dallas has. How do you think the Mavericks open the series guarding Ant? Do they go straight to 2 on the ball, or is it some combination of, Derek Jones Jr. and, whoever else that may take the challenge, Josh Green, of guarding Anthony Edwards one-on-one?
Yeah, I think Derrick Jones Jr. starts on him. And what the Mavericks have done with both SGA and James Harden, who's not the same, but to a lesser extent, they have just funneled them towards the rim and funneled them towards help and allowed SGA to try and beat them one-on-one. Like, hey, if you're going to hit 50% of your mid-range shots, we're going to live with that. We don't want you to kill us from three and hit a bunch. And so that was their plan against both the Clippers and the Thunder. Those teams take a lot more threes than I think the Timberwolves do. And so I think that's something that is going to be different here. And so it's kind of comparing two different offenses really to try and figure out how you're going to defend against them. But I don't think they're going to send two to the ball that quickly. I think that they'll try their initial approach with, all right, let's just funnel him to help and funnel him to the rim a little bit and not let him get a wide open shot play up on him. But I think they will send a trap eventually, because I think that they'll say, all right, Towns, you got to beat us. All right, Conley, you got to beat our size. Gobert at the rim, you try. Like, can you do a post move? Like, I don't know. Last time he played a playoff game in the American Airlines Center, he threw a hook shot right off of Jerry West's head, which was Theo Pinson came on Locked On Mavs that year, and that was the most I've laughed, I think, maybe on the show, is when he said he's like, the whole bench just started looking at each other and just said, he just hit Jerry West right in the face.
That's Rudy post-ups are not aesthetically pleasing, but points per possession, the Wolves will actually like. Sure. It's Chris Finch has said this before. Like, they actually they kind of sort of work. You don't want them. You're not scheming them up, except for that inbounds play when he hit that crazy fadeaway against Denver. Like, you're not trying to get those, but like the Wolves, to a fault, sometimes it's an issue. We'll try and force the ball to Rudy if he's got a mismatch. So yeah. I mean, but like, it's going to end in either a ridiculously awesome made shot or hitting hopefully not a Hall of Famer, but somebody in the head with an errant shot.
Yeah, it's just because the logo on the corner of the backboard is sitting there, which was that was too funny. Theo Pinson.
Well, he actually had one this last game that or no, maybe it was 2 games, maybe it was game 6 that slipped out of his hands. That was just like, I mean, Rudy has these, and that's one of the reasons why he gets clowned all the time, but like, he's so I don't know. He's still such an impactful player regardless. It's just, he's such a polarizing player. So related to the, I guess talking about how they may defend. Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So like, the last couple teams that the Wolves have played haven't had that rim protector, right? So like Phoenix, Yusuf Nurkic, not a rim protector. Denver, Nikola Jokic, not a traditional rim protector, and no size behind him. So that's a little bit different than what, for Wolves fans to pay attention to, than what Minnesota's faced with Phoenix and Denver, because there is rim protection. There's athleticism on the back line for Dallas that can at least challenge Ant at the rim. And that'll be interesting because Anthony Edwards is happy to pull up from the mid-range at times. Yeah. And he is a true 3-level scorer, and sometimes to his detriment, because he knows he can make those shots, even if they're not the most efficient shots. We all saw the turnaround jumpers he hit against Phoenix and early in the series against Denver, and all the MJ comparisons because of that. But that's not always the best play. Like, it's great that you have it if you need it, but if Dallas is going to force him into those shots, it's going to be, like you said, is it Cat? Is it, is there another player that can perform? And we talked about this in part 1. Will Karl-Anthony Towns be one of the big keys to the series offensively for Minnesota? Looking at each bench unit, Minnesota has the 6th man of the year. They have Naz Reid. We talked about him in part 1. He is fantastic. I mean, he had a massive stretch in game 7 in the 4th quarter over Denver. Dallas's bench looks very different than it did earlier this season. I mean, like, is this a Tim Hardaway Jr. series? I know he's like on the fringes of the rotation, but is this like they need a punch of scoring against a good defense, and so suddenly we're going to Tim Hardaway Jr.? Or what should Wolves fans be aware of when it comes to Dallas's bench?
Did you hear that? That was the sound of a million groans of Mavericks fans when you said, "Is this a Tim Hardaway Jr. series?"
I mean, my experience with Tim Hardaway Jr. following the Wolves is like, he'll come out and this is probably, I think, overall the THJ experience is that he'll randomly score, 28.
Yep,
multiple games in a row, and then he'll do nothing for a long period of time.
We're in the long period of time right now.
Gotcha. Yeah,
this is what we're in. In game 2 against the Thunder, though, he came out of nowhere, had been very bad for 2 months, and had 17 points in game 2 against the Thunder, and was a key reason why they won. And so they'll go to him at times. He has not been a key player off the bench for them, though. Since the trades, basically, his role has really been limited. The key is, the key guy off the bench is Dereck Lively, who has just been awesome. He's been awesome in 2 playoff series. I think he's going to get to play a lot in this series too because of the size there. And he was great against Zubats. He was pretty good against He was really good against Chet, outplayed him at times in that series, which I thought was interesting. And so that's the key for them. And the other key is Maxi Kleber coming off the bench. And that's the key to the Mavs playing 5 out. They do not play 5 out at all unless they have Maxi Kleber out there, because they don't go to PJ Washington at the 5. Maybe that's something they go to here, but they didn't against the Thunder, and they didn't really against the Clippers at all. And they really didn't in the regular season at all. So unless Jason Kidd gets real desperate and decides, let's try something that we've really never done that much this whole time, which I guess teams do. But if Maxi is able to play, he had an AC separation, so his shoulder, he had an issue with it. He came down really hard. He took a wild leap from like a foot inside the free throw line and jumped at Amir Coffey, and Amir Coffey kind of like hit him in the air, and he fell down right on his shoulder, and he's been out since then. Only played, it was like game 6 of the Clippers series. And so if he comes back, which he could, he was on target to come back. If he comes back, that changes a lot. The Mavs are able to give a bunch of different looks. The Mavs are able to play bigger, which I think is going to be key against the Timberwolves, and they need that kind of size against the Timberwolves. And they need the shooting of Maxi Kleber. He was shooting the ball really well, and one of their best 3-point shooters in that first round series against the Clippers. So those are the 2 key guys off the benches there. They're both bigs.
All right, I want to talk about how the Mavs guard Karl-Anthony Towns and what happens if the Mavericks struggle in this series against the Wolves. What does that look like? We'll talk about all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at BetterHelp. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all carry around different stressors, big and small. When we keep the bottled up, it can start to affect us negatively. Therapy is a safe space to get things off your chest and to figure out how to work through whatever is weighing you down. For Timberwolves fans, there's probably not a whole lot basketball related that's bothering you. Maybe it's that the Wolves got down 20 points in game 4, and now they have, or game 7, now they have a difficult matchup against Luka Doncic. And could the path have been any easier to get to the conference, to the finals? Could it have been like Boston's path, right? I mean, grand scheme of things, if you're a Wolves fan, basketball is probably not your biggest concern right now because things are going extremely well. But look, therapy looks different for everyone. We've all got different things that are on our chest that we need to get off our chest. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, so we talked about how the Mavs may guard Anthony Edwards. We talked in part 1 about how Karl-Anthony Towns may be one of the keys for this series for Minnesota. Dallas being a team that certainly has size and has, not that PJ Washington and Karl-Anthony Towns are super similar players because they're not all that similar, but they're similar in that they both stretch the floor as 4s. And, both teams play more of a modern era traditional 5. So in that sense, it's more similar to Phoenix and Denver, other teams the Wolves have played in the playoffs. What do you think Dallas does to try and slow down Karl-Anthony Towns? Or is it just simply, I guess the first part of that is who's guarding Cat? And then are we just going to live with whatever Cat does to us and make him beat us versus Anthony Edwards? Or what's the thought process behind trying to slow down Karl-Anthony Towns in this series?
Yeah, one of the keys in the Thunder series was they put PJ Washington on Chet Holmgren. And so that way it wasn't, them sending up, Chet Holmgren to set a screen or to space out the centers. And so the centers were able to stay around the rim, and the Mavs were able to funnel some of those guys, some of the ball handlers to the rim, and the center was waiting there instead of PJ Washington waiting there. And so I think that was a real big key for them. I think since they're going to be playing a center basically the whole time against the Timberwolves, I think they'll put PJ on Cat, and I think that's going to be the big matchup. And I think that is a huge swing matchup because PJ was the best player in certain halves against the Thunder, best player on the floor because they were leaving him open at times, like we mentioned before, because he was getting one-on-one coverage or he was having a real small guy defending him or Josh Giddey or whoever. And so PJ Washington was really key for them, and then the Thunder kind of wised up on PJ Washington, and then Derrick Jones Jr. became the guy that got left open or got left with the worst defender on the roster or on the floor. And so then he had some big games in the last couple. But PJ versus Cat, I think that's the swing matchup right there. Is if PJ can contain Cat and if he can limit his scoring, limit his effectiveness, maybe get him into foul trouble, then that's really good for the Mavericks. I don't think PJ has to outscore Cat. I just think he has to outplay him, quality wise between the two of them. And I think that's where that matchup goes.
Yeah, we talked about Cat's proclivity for foul trouble in the first part of this crossover, and that is also, I think, related, and certainly a key for the series. When I was looking at like some of the different numbers for Dallas, and thinking back to the Thunder series, I mean, on the season, Dallas didn't actually turn the ball over that much as an offense, but it does feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it does feel like when they're not going well, when they're having issues, and this is maybe the case for a lot of teams, but turnovers really crop up, and Luka could be prone to them. Dallas as a team, I think in their game 1 loss, OKC had like 15 turnovers. They had 13 or 14 in their was it game 3 loss, I guess, against the Thunder, or game whatever it was, game 4. Is there what is like kind of a red flag for you when like Dallas isn't playing well? There's something like, if I showed you a box score and said like, based on this box score, what do you think happened? And there's something that stands out that like, hey, Dallas lost this game because, is it turnovers? Is it volume of 3-point shots? Is it like, I guess what are the things that stand out to you?
Yeah, turnovers is one of the biggest ones, because the Mavericks struggle when teams get out in transition. You pad those extra possessions. That's how the Thunder won in game 1 and 4. Basically, they got some extra possessions from turnovers, and they were able to turn those into fast break points on the other end. And they got those in game 6 too, but the Mavs were able to overcome them, in a bunch of different other ways. So turnovers is definitely a huge one. If they turn the ball over, their transition defense hasn't been that great. And so the other one is Luka's field goal percentage. It's literally been the difference. In the Thunder series, he shot 30% in game 1 and game 4. They lost both of those. He shot 40, 50, 60% in the other games, and they won those. Like, if he is on, and it's because of the knee, we're really watching this, but if he's on and he's hitting, especially those shots like 10 feet from the rim, he can get to that spot. And if he hits those little floaters or those little like, mini mid-range shots, if he can hit those, then that's huge for the Mavericks. His 3-point shooting has come and gone. If he's hitting his 3-point shots, then they're winning. Like, he becomes unguardable at that point, and it's proven that like he's almost unguardable when his 3-point shot is going down. But as long as he's hitting those like mini mid-range ones, they're not turning the ball over that much, and they need a couple other guys to come out and play. It's either PJ or Derrick Jones Jr. or one of the two centers, or Maxey had some big games against the Clippers. Somebody like that. They have to get somebody else like that to go. And so if you look at the box score, and it's Luka missing some shots, turnovers, Kyrie really isn't going, and then none of the other role guys are stepping up, then their Mavs are losing by like 40. So
yeah, so I guess along those lines, if you had to pick, I guess this is the last one, outside of Kyrie and Luka, if you had to pick one player that, looking back on the series, you were like, okay, this was the swing player for the series. Like for me with the Wolves in Denver is Jaden McDaniels, who wasn't great the first part of the series, was awesome in game 6 and game 7, scored 20 plus consecutive games for the first time in his career, great defensively. Who's the one player that if Dallas wins this series in 6 or 7 games, because I don't think there's any way the series goes less than 5 games for either team, who's that player that's not named Kyrie or Luka that makes the biggest difference for the Mavs?
I think it's got to be PJ Washington so far. He had really big games. You have game 2 against the Thunder where he was really good, game 3 against the Thunder where he was really good, and then like he's hit 3-point shots that have been open. He's taken advantage of matchups. He's shown things that he'd not even show in the regular season at all, which I think is wild. So he's really big. The other one that I kind of want to throw in there, since this is we're wrapping up here, Kyrie. Kyrie was massive in the Clippers series, and I was so confident that Kyrie was just on another level, playing on another level of life, that he could get any shot he wanted, and that he's been doing this thing all season long, where he will have like 4 points in the first half, or like 5 points in the first half, and you go, man, Kyrie really hasn't gotten involved. Kyrie's got to get more involved, and like that's what you say at halftime, and then by the end of the game, he has 25, 26 points because he just goes off in these second halves. In the Thunder series, that did not happen. We did not see Kyrie go on these little runs. Jalen Williams played really, really well on him defensively. Casey Wallace played really well on him defensively. And Kyrie was exerting a lot of energy on the defensive end. And so I'm curious to see if this is a Kyrie series. He had the one game he played against the Timberwolves, he had 35 against Anthony Edwards, who was guarding him. Although I went back and I watched most of the shots that he took, and Anthony Edwards died on every single screen that was set. I don't think he was very interested in playing in that game that day. And I expect his defense to be better in the playoffs than it was that random regular season game in January. But that's a big key too, is how can Kyrie affect the series? And if he affects it scoring wise, then I think that's a good sign for the Mavericks. Seems like a cop-out answer because he's a star, but it wasn't there for them in the the last round against the Thunder.
Well, yeah, like you said, the Wolves haven't really seen him, and to your point on Ant, like that's 100% the case. Like Ant wasn't guarding. Ant wouldn't normally guard Jamal Murray, right? Like Jaden McDaniels guards the primary ball handler, and Chris Finch said, no, let's do this. Let's put Ant on Jamal Murray because he can overwhelm him with size and strength, fight through screens, etc. And if that's the matchup and he gets Kyrie, like, I mean, there's going to be moments in there. Kyrie's an incredible player. He's going to score. But I think if Ant is interested, which he should be in the playoffs, like,
yeah, you think so?
You hope so. Yeah. And I don't worry too much about it. I think that that'll turn out okay for the Wolves with Ant guarding Kyrie. But all right. So that's all we have here for the crossover. Of course, part one was yesterday. If you missed it, you can find it on either Locked On Wolves or Locked On Mavs. And this is part two. Of course, tomorrow, or I guess today, is game one of the series. So we'll have post-game podcast, reaction, all that stuff coming up on Thursday's show. So be sure to subscribe and follow Locked On Wolves and Locked On Mavericks wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll catch you next time.